Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're looking at the 9.7 support tier list. So as always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe. It just takes a couple of clicks. It's free, it's easy, it helps out a ton on the channel. If I release too much content for you and you don't want to get flooded on your feed, you can always uncheck the bell. And as always as well, we will have timestamps in the description if you don't have time to watch the whole video. Also, I have a link to this Google Doc in the description so you can follow along easily and skip around to your favorite parts. We also have a lot of other content on the channel. We have an 80 carry tier list that I'm probably going to release tomorrow. We have live streams starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night. We have a coaching playlist with about 170 videos in it. We have topical guides, a big playlist for that. Everything such as one trick, how to micro better, how to macro better, thinking about dodging, thinking about itemization and values. Just dozens and dozens of guides. So tons and tons of content. Check out the rest of the stuff on the channel. We'd love to have you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. So as always, I like to do just a really quick meta overview of things that have been shifting and just sort of really quickly think about the patch notes and just any sort of other innovations that have come about over the course of 9.6, moving into 9.7. So I still think that tanks are going to be in a rough spot overall. I know that some people like LS think that tanks might be back on the horizon in top lane and in the jungle. That might happen to an extent. I could see some tanks coming back in the top, like maybe Shen. Some tanky, like difficult to kill champions like Irelia and Urgot are still going to be up there. But as far as your proper, a lot of your proper team fight tanks, your Maokai top, your Ornn top, that kind of stuff, I still think it's going to be really rough, primarily because Kayle and Urgot shut that down really hard. They're both very popular as well. And there are a lot of other tank busters that are still good in the top lane. And these nerfs to Kayle and to Urgot, they are actually nerfs, but they're not enough to matter. I've seen Kayle several times in the stream. Earlier tonight, she's still really, really strong. The Wits End change is actually a huge buff on her. We'll talk about that here in a second. Urgot, a slap on the wrist. He's still going to be very strong in top lane and in the jungle. So because of their presence and a couple of other like popular tank busters or champs that can be tank busters in the top lane, Shen is also very good against other tanks, especially with the Wits End build. It's going to be very, very difficult for tanks to come back in the top lane. So don't expect to see, your Scions, your Cho'Gaths, your Malakais, that type of stuff in top. It's definitely better than it was a few patches ago after the nerfs to Conquer and, thanks to some of the buffs on some items out there. But overall, still not going to be that amazing in the top lane. In the jungle, it might be a little bit better. Some Cinderhulk tanks might start coming back because Cinderhulk got a really big buff to its wave clear. So champions that are already pretty good in the jungle are going to get a little bit better, like Nunu, who rushes Cinderhulk's good. Hecarim is really good in top lane, and he's going to be pretty good in the jungle potentially. Now, he doesn't usually finish Cinderhulk until he's already got his Trinity. I think he typically goes Skirmisher Saber and then completes Trinity and then circles back to Cinderhulk eventually. But it still could be okay on him. And then you might see out of the jungle like a Rammus, who already has a decent win rate. It's pretty good against assassins, especially AD assassins. And then Sejuani, Zac, and Skarner. So these all are going to gain a little bit off these Cinderhulk changes, but I'm not entirely sold that we're going to see them just because some of these tank busters are going to be very, very strong, especially the on-hit stuff with Wits End. The Wits End is super, super powerful right now. So, like, Vayne is the most popular AD carry and the most powerful. She destroys tanks. Irelia gets a huge boost with Wits End. Kayle gets a huge boost with Wits End. Urgot just destroys tanks. So, we might see some of these back in, but, it's still going to be tough in some situations. Okay, Leona got directly buffed. Also, Hecarim is really strong in the jungle right now and a bunch of other divers. That means that champions that are decent into divers, like Lulu, are going to be a lot stronger here. Tahm, Kench, in certain circumstances, can be really strong if you have a Jinx or a Twitch or some other hyper carry with you. Tahm Kench can help protect them in ways that other champs can't. It's really hard to protect against a Hecarim to peel that dude back when he ults onto your backline because he becomes unstoppable when he ults. So, and Leona can be very difficult to peel as well, depending on how she uses her ult. But yeah, so it's going to give a little bit more of a boost to some of the champs, particularly Lulu and Tahm Kench. Wits End buff is massive. This item is very, very strong right now. So it was decent before, but the problem was not everybody benefited in their personal DPS from getting the extra magic resist shred. So yeah, you could get it on Vayne. Yeah, you could get it on Irelia, but they don't do a ton of magic damage, so you weren't getting a ton off of that shred. But now if we look at this item, it's already cost efficient, you know, to an extent, right? It's, you know, when you get it, it's probably the worst case scenario if you had this in your inventory at level 1 would be 93% cost efficiency. And realistically, it's going to be closer to about 120 to start with when this is like 60 on-hit damage. And then when it goes all the way up to 150%, and that does not include the lifesteal off of this. Don't forget that lifesteal is crazy. It's only when you're below 50% health. But it still lifesteals for quite a bit. So this item is very, very strong. If you compare that to something like Phantom Dancer, then Phantom Dancer, I believe, is something like 85% efficient. So it's nowhere close on the efficiency chart to this item. So it is more expensive, but it also scales a lot harder, does a lot more on-hit damage, has the lifesteal in it. It's really, really strong. So this is going to benefit, like I said, Irelia, Vayne, Kayle, Shen, anything that, you know, either gets Gensus or is pretty tanky and also benefits from on-hit effects. So that's a huge pool of champs. So this means that champions that get Ardent Sensor are going to be a lot stronger because they're going to have more attack speed to trigger the Ardent Sensor. If they're getting Ardent Sensor, there's a good chance they're getting Gensus or Hurricane somewhere in there as well. And so all of those mean that Ardent Sensor is going to be even better. And particularly Lulu is going to be good with this because she adds an extra on, well, not on hit, but on attack effect, which benefits heavily from attack speed with her picks. And then she also boosts up your AD carry to have a bunch of extra movement speed so they can stick easier to the target. And so they get a lot of extra attack damage. So Lulu is one of the premier Ardent Sensor buffers out there. And so she's going to get a lot stronger off of this, not only because of Wit's End being a lot stronger, but also because she's pretty decent into things like Hecarim, into things like Leona for an Enchanter. There aren't many other people that can use Ardent Sensor that are going to be as useful against those diver type of champs as Lulu. Janna used to be able to fulfill that role, and she can still to an extent, but she has a much weaker early game and can get punished by a lot of the popular supports out there like Sona, and like Nami right now during the laning phase. So Lulu's still pretty good in the laning phase, but this is going to make her a much higher priority champ, I think. So some of the really good ones with Wit's End that I mentioned, we got Vayne, Kog'Maw, Varus, Kai'Sa, Master Yi, Irelia, Jax, Kayle, maybe Twitch. It's kind of weird, but like I think that you could go Blazerun King, Hurricane, Wit's End on Twitch. I would have to do more math to see if the critical strike, the power of that, outweighs having the 50% extra attack speed and the like 60 extra on-hit damage. I feel like the on-hit actually would be stronger, and the attack speed, because you're going to get 25% crit off of Infinity Edge. You also do get the modifier, and you get a lot of AD, so I don't know. But like one thing to keep in mind off of Twitch is his ultimate, as it passes through, the base damage gets lowered by 20% for each individual target. So when you're hitting a lot of people in a fight, the people that are on the back line are going to take a lot less damage than the people on the front line. Like, he can totally delete people. Everyone knows that about Twitch. But he gets that 20% less damage per enemy that it goes through. That does not apply to on-hit damage. That only applies to his normal basic attacks, which can crit as they go through. But you would basically get the full value out of Wit's End on each person that this passes through, and each one of the Hurricane bolts would also apply the Wit's End. So, and Wit's End is cheaper. It's 2,900 versus 3,400 gold. So I'm not sure. He might still go Infinity Edge because you're already invested in Hurricane. You're already going to have 25% crit. So getting up to 50% crit with the Hurricane modifier and the extra AD might just be better. But it's certainly something that's worth thinking about. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind there. Burst AP champs are going to be a little bit weaker. First of all, because people are going to be abusing this Wit's End hard, I think, in a lot of lanes, and it gives 50 magic resist. So that's going to be really hard to blow those champions up with some of your burst champions, like your Lissandras out there, your Syndras, your Annies. It's going to get a bit harder out there. And then they're also nerfing Dark Seal, which I think... there's a couple of different applications of Dark Seal. It's usually used by people that are going to get Corrupting Potion first and then go to Dark Seal later. So it could be, I mean, it will affect some manaless champs like Katarina potentially. But I think by and large, it's early game bullies who can auto attack a lot and who can really leverage the damage that you do off of Corrupting Potion. So I don't think this is going to matter below Diamond for a lot of people because most people don't use Corrupting Potion that well to begin with. They don't really take advantage of the extra damage that you get on your auto attacks. But at higher level elo, I think this is going to allow melee champions to be stronger and scaling champions to be stronger. So champions like Rise, champions like Azir are going to get a little bit better because they don't want to get Corrupting Potion and a bunch of Dark Seals. They want to start scaling, right? They want to get their tier. They want to, you know, get their Nashor's Tooth or their Ludens online. You know, they just want to step up the chain and not just play around their level 6 power spike. So I think that this will be better, particularly for champs like Zed, like Talon, because they can get around the Wit's End. Wit's End's going to be everywhere. You might see a return of like Irelia mid lane, possibly Yasuo mid lane. Yasuo could use that new Wit's End. Perhaps. Might be a little weird, but as like a third item, I could certainly see it. If he wants to go like, you know, Infinity Edge, Phantom Dancer, Wit's End, that could be a build that he might consider. So I think that scaling champs will be a little bit better, and it's going to be harder for assassins because they're not going to be able to bully as much in the laning phase without their Dark Seals, or with their Dark Seals being very minimized, and without being able to abuse the interaction between Dark Seal and Corrupting Potion. And then also with the Wit's End once again. So that does help out Enchanters a little bit. I mean, the Zed and the Talon, if people go that route, that would be bad. But if people go for kind of the longer team fight type of champs in the mid lane, or more control mage type of stuff, that could bode well for Enchanters because there would be less burst overall. Okay, sustained tank breakers might also come back. So Rise is already pretty good in pro. Azir has potential. Sadie, get down. What are you doing? Get down. Get down. Cassiopeia. Now, Cassiopeia was a Dark Seal abuser. So we'll see about that. But some of those champs might get better if we start seeing tanks. You know, if we start seeing more Sejuanis out of the jungle, you might see the tank breaker mages coming back a little bit more. We'll see. Zombie Ward, pretty good buff. You can get up to 30 adaptive damage. Now, you have to really sweep and get a lot of, like, wards cleared. You're probably not going to get that till, like, 20 or 30 minutes. I tried this out some tonight. Some champions could get Relentless Hunter with this and have, like, better roaming. So maybe Leona, Alistar, Nautilus, Blitz. So that would allow you to roam, and that would give you some scaling with eyeball collection, which would be nice. Because right now, they already nerfed Dematerializer, where it's not as good on supports anymore. And a lot of supports, these roaming supports, don't want the magical footwear because they want to get Mobies ASAP. So, you know, that leaves you getting things like biscuits. It just kind of leaves you out high and dry, like biscuits plus the Time Warp Tonic or something. There just aren't, there's the secondary inspiration has been nerfed quite a bit, so that could open up a space to go for something like Zombie Ward. Another option could be something like Ingenious Hunter if you're a champion that's going to get Redemption plus Locket pretty early, like Tahm, Kench, or Thresh. If you want to go for that kind of build, the double activatable, you could do Ingenious Hunter with Zombie Ward. That actually lowers the cooldown on your sweepers, so you can sweep more wards. So that could be something that could be pretty good, potentially. And then, like, maybe with Enchanters, you could go Taste of Blood. Or with, like, Soraka, maybe you could go Ulti Hunter. And then also get Zombie Ward. The problem is that Revitalize is really OP on Enchanters most of the time. So you kind of have to go into the Resolve tree. But it's just something to think about. I mean, we'll see how Zombie Ward interacts. It may not be a huge game break or game changer, but it could be interesting. Another thing about tanks is they really don't scale that well with AP or AD usually. So it's like, okay, you get 30 extra AP on Leona or 18 extra attack damage, whatever the case may be. It's like, that's nice, but is it worth sacrificing some other runes that, you know, might have a better effect on you? I don't know. So the champions this would be best on, the 30 AP, are the Enchanters because they scale so well with AP and how that combines with plus healing and shielding. But it's also the hardest to get it on them because Revitalize is so strong. Okay. Why play Enchanters in solo queue and why do pros play tanks? I'm going to do a whole video about this, but the real quick TLDR is an organized play. There are more team fights. So having a champion that puts out a lot more like multi-target CC, like a Braum, like a Galio, like an Alistar, are going to be a lot better in organized play. And just because you can call your shots too, you're on comms with people, you can say, hey, I'm going to engage, group up, I'm going to engage, let's do this. You know, versus in solo queue, people may or may not follow up on you. They may or may not expect your engage. So it's just a little bit sketchier in that sense in solo queue. Also, economy and scaling. So your base stats are a lot higher on tanks. You have more health. You have more armor. So that has a really strong gold value in general. And so because pros aren't going to make that much gold, there aren't a lot of people dying. They have to spend a ton of money on wards and early boots and a 4-ward item, all that stuff. Then the scaling doesn't matter as much. But when you're in solo queue and you're playing a silver game and the final score is like 40-40 and you've got 3 items, then something like Sona is going to do a lot better. And I mean, this isn't just sort of my reasoning or opinion. I mean, that's statistically, that's how it is, right? It's Sona, Nami, Janna, and Soraka up at the top of the charts in terms of overall win rates. And the only tanks that you start seeing really that have a high rate of play are like Blitzcrank, Thresh, Leona, Nautilus, things that can actually make plays like more easily. So the peeler tanks, you know, your Braums, your Tahms, your Galios, that kind of stuff is almost always going to be a little bit lower for those reasons. That doesn't mean they can't be good, and we'll talk about specifically Tahm, Kench, and why he's rising up a bit in priority, and how Leona is a little bit stronger. But it just means that in general, that's kind of the overall trend, and that's why the win rates are the way that they are. Vision priority, a lot of times you just need somebody tanky who can go face check bushes, like with your team, not by yourself, but who can like walk into that bush and see if they're there, right? Whenever you need to check on Baron or whenever it's a really contested hot area, you don't want to get blown up in pro play like face checking a bush is Sona. You'd much rather be something like a Braum or a Tahm Kench, right? Where you're going to have a bit more survivability to give your team time to react and follow up. And because there are less tanks being played top and less tanks in the jungle, then that means having a tank in the support role is going to be a big help in terms of vision. Tactical flexibility. If you play a tank bot, you don't have to play through bot as much because usually the tanks tend to play on kind of the reserved safe side, a lot of them. Like Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench Ezreal has been a very popular lane for a while. So that means that frees you up to be able to play through mid lane and top lane. If you play something like a Janna or a Sona or something like that bot lane, you have to go down there because they want to harass a lot, they want to push, they want to try to get tower plates, so that's going to draw down the enemy jungler. And so your jungler has to be willing to stay down there to counter ganks. That means that your solo lanes have to be able to fend for themselves. So that puts a lot more strain on you tactically, and when you're trying to build a team in Champion Select, it's just a lot easier just to early pick a tank support and just have the flexibility to play around a bunch of different lanes. So, you know, you could play something like Janna or Sona bot, but in pro play at that level, you're basically going to need a babysitter to counteract. It forces them to play around bot, though, too. So, you know, if you're just constantly AFK pushing with, you know, Karma, Caitlyn, or Lulu, Caitlyn, or whatever bot lane, it's going to force their jungler to come down probably. So then that's going to free up your jungler to have a good 1v1 top lane. So I could definitely see some strategies there, but in general, that's why a lot of people opt for tanks in the bot lane. And then finally, like I said before, there aren't a lot of tanks in the top, and there aren't a lot of tanks in the jungle right now. So just having someone who can take a lot of the hits in fights is helpful. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the tier list proper here now that we've kind of reviewed where the meta is going overall. So I still think that Nami is going to be number 1 right now. Overall, she's just very flexible. She has pretty respectable scaling with her wave, the plus healing and shielding, the AP, the item that she gets. She's a very good Athene's user. She can put Athene's comfortably on 3 different people in fights. She can use her E to apply Airy to somebody. That'll trigger Athene's, and then the bounces of her wave can hit 2 more people. The same is true of Ardent Sensor. So she can apply Ardent Sensor to 3 other people as well. So it's very good at spreading around the buffs and playing around some of the most powerful enchanter items right now. And she has pretty good CC, right? You have your bubble, which can hit multiple targets potentially, and you have your wave, which can hit multiple targets. And you're very good at chasing people down with your E, right? So that applies a nice slow to allow things like Vayne, Lucian, stuff like that to run other people down. And all of her abilities speed people up. So just that extra little bit of boost in speed can help people get away from ganks. It can help you chase, follow, rotate. There's so many different things you could do with her. So she doesn't scale as hard in 5v5 team fights if she's left alone as something like Sona. She doesn't have as much kill threat in lane as something like Leona, but she's just a good mixture of a bunch of different things where she has respectable kill threat, she has respectable healing, very good guaranteed harass. You just walk up and press W on somebody, you know, does a ton of damage when you have Airy, Scorch, and the base damage is pretty high, and it heals you all in one ability. So I still think in my mind that's going to make Nami the best overall. Sona does have a higher win rate right now, but Nami's not like super far behind, and I just feel like she's a bit safer. Her spell ranges are something that a lot of people forget about or don't think about as much as well, right? So her wave has 700 range where you can heal somebody. Her E has like 800 or 900 range, so you can influence fights from a great distance there. Her ult has like 2500 range. You know, her bubble has like 900 range. So that's really nice. When you start thinking about champions like Sona, her aura, for you to get the maximum benefit out of the aura with people, you have to be within like 400 or 450 range in order to get the shield or to get the extra empowered auto attack with the Q. So Sona can be good, but she has to be closer to the action, and subsequently that means that you're going to get hit by more collateral stuff, right? When someone runs in there, when Vlad casts his ult, or Kennen casts his ult, or a Mumu, or whatever, you're just going to get hit by AoE as much. People are going to be able to focus you out and CC you when you have to get that close. So it is something that's really underappreciated by Nami, is that if she has to, if it's a dangerous fight, she can play very far back and still have a really big impact on the fight. So I think that makes Nami the ideal choice right now if you like to play her. She is a bit harder to play than something like Sona, but she's still going to be on the strong side. So I would just run with Airy, Mana Flow Band, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, Bone Plating, and then Revitalize. With Bone Plating, if you're against another Enchanter, you could go Second Wind. If they have an Assassin, you know, you could consider doing something like Conditioning to get a little bit of extra armor and magic resist, but I think that Bone Plating is pretty good, especially during the laning phase against all-ins. Then I just go Mobility Boots, Frostfang, Athene's, Redemption, and Ardent. So I would almost always go Athene's first. It just has insane value. It ends up giving you something along the lines of an extra 30 to 50% plus healing and shielding on your W. It gives you a lot of AP, gives you some magic resist, gives you 100% mana regen, which is, you know, more than Ardent Censer, which only gives 50%. And it scales with every other item that you get. So every other fairy charm that you get, you're going to get an extra 5 AP. So by the time you complete Athene's plus Redemption and your Frostfang, then you're going to have 90 AP on this item, which is a 2100 gold item. 90 AP usually comes on items that are like over 3,000 gold, like Luden's Echo, Death Cap, that type of stuff. So you start getting a very, very good value off of this item. So I have people ask me all the time, when should you go Ardent, when should you go Athene's? And the only time I would go Ardent is if your AD carry is mega fed and they're going to get something like Ginsu's. So if it's like you have a Vayne that's 5-0 in the laning phase, you could consider it. Although like not having that mana regen in the early and the mid game, you know, giving up that 50% mana regen can be really rough. So I would still go Athene's most of the time. And then if you want to switch out Ardent for Redemption, if you're doing really well, that could be helpful. I just like Redemption because it gives you more mana regen, which converts to better AP. And then it helps everybody, even like champions that don't benefit a ton from Ardent Censer. So like mages, for example, you know, everybody benefits from healing. And it has a lot of range. I think it has like 5,500 range. So you can throw it halfway across the map and influence fights. So it gives you a lot of extra macro pressure. And it has some HP on it. You know, it's got like 200 health or something on it, which isn't a lot, but that certainly helps. Ardent Censer doesn't have any sort of defensive stat on it whatsoever. So that's why I usually like going Redemption, but Ardent Censer is also respectable. You definitely want these 3 items. It's just the order in which you get them could vary. So that's sort of thing about Nami. Still going to be very strong. Sona, talk about her all the time. Very strong champ still. Highest statistical win rate champion. She's the queen of 5v5. You know, if your team groups up, if tanks do start coming back, especially, we start seeing more of these 5v5 team fights. You know, you start seeing the Jarvans, the Rumbles, Vlads, all these champs that want to do 5v5s. She's going to be very strong at that. Now, some people, you know, get very confused about Sona, and it's very tempting to build her in some different ways. Now, unfortunately, you know, I guess fortunately, it's whatever, but on stream, I was debating with somebody about tier Sona in 2019 and whether or not tier Sona is good, and it was like an hour, or it was like multiple games. We were trying to talk about this. You should not get tier on support Sona. So let me give you some background history here. So the reason that tier became popular in the first place was this really came out in 2017. Tier of the Goddess was a lot stronger back then. It used to only be 750 gold instead of 800 gold, and it used to stack more efficiently over time. Also, the most popular build back then was going double activatable because Redemption and Locket were both really overpowered back then. And so that was in early 2017, so Season 7. And so you just wanted one mana item that would solve all your mana problems. And so you would just get tier, and then you could get your double activatables, and boom, your mana problems are fixed, okay? Because you were only going one mana item. All right, and then after that, the norm became, after they nerfed Locket and Redemption, the norm became just to rush Ardent Censer, and then figure it out after that, right? And games were a lot faster at that point as well. So you would get tier and then rush Ardent Censer, and that fixed all your mana problems because you're only getting one big mana item. Well, tier got nerfed after that, and then runes got changed around. I don't believe they had the dynamic runes back then as well, and nobody would get like flat mana. Sometimes you'd get some mana regen on some of your runes, but by and large, you had to get defensive stuff on your enchanters, right? You would get flat armor, you know, on a lot of your runes, and then you would end up getting flat AP or flat magic resist. So you'd have armor yellows, magic resist blues, AP quints. You wouldn't get any mana regen in any of your runes. Well, now, after that, once the dynamic runes came out in Season 8, then you could get things like Mana Flow Band, which helps you out a lot. You could get things like Biscuit, potentially, which could help you out. So there were a lot of different tools to help you out with your mana regen. I believe champions like Sona may have gotten a little bit higher mana regen buff overall. I'm not 100% about that. But like the main gist of it was tier got nerfed, and now people get a lot of mana regen items, right? Like every item's mana regen. You almost never see Locket on enchanters anymore. And you have things like Mana Flow Band to help you out. And water dragons exist. I don't remember if elemental dragons existed in Season 7. It might have been the money dragons. But dragons certainly were buffed in Season 8 to give you a higher value if you get like a water elemental drake. And the big one in Season 8 was they introduced Athene's Unholy Grail, or they buffed it a lot. So they changed it from converting 25% of your damage into converting 35% of your damage. And so that made Athene's very, very desirable on a lot of champions over Ardent Censer, especially after the Ardent nerfs, which happened near the end of Season 7. So now you could rush Frostfang really comfortably. You could get Mana Flow Band, and you could get a 100% mana regen item instead of a 50% mana regen item as your first buy. And so now you have a ton of mana regen early, and you can still get Redemption and Ardent Censer are both very, very strong. So you have 3 items that can give you a ton of extra power. And there's more gold in general, especially in the early game, because they changed the shutdown system, so there's more gold for shutdowns now, and they added in the tower plates near the end of last season, or that might have actually been in the preseason. They added those tower plates in there. So that's more gold in the early game. So you're accelerating your build. You're able to complete your second and third item a bit faster. So what that means is if you end up buying Tier the Goddess, you're dropping 850 gold on something that doesn't build in anything as support. It's basically like you're sacrificing something like 4 or 5 assists worth of gold in order to have virtually unlimited mana, which is cool. But the problem is, like, you already have almost unlimited mana, right? You can just early buy. It's not troll at all to just go ahead and buy like 3 or 4 fairy charms, depending on your back, and then you basically have unlimited mana. But you can sell those back at a reasonable cost if you have to. If you need that much mana early on, you can sell them back, or you can turn them into the items. You know, almost every item you're going to get is going to have at least 2 fairy charms in it, and some of them will have even more than that. So I'll call that renting a fairy charm if you need it. You can buy it for 125, you sell it back for 87 or whatever. I think it's like 88. You sell it back for 88 gold. You only paid 37 gold to give you that temporary crutch for the laning phase if you really want to spam your spells. So I would much rather lose 37 gold and buy an extra fairy charm if you need more mana than to drop 850 gold on something that, yeah, you can sell back, but you're going to lose like 400 gold off of that. So all in all, I just think you should have enough mana to manage. Remember, you're going to have to go back. They also nerfed the timing on wards. Remember, wards used to last 3 minutes, I believe, back in Season 7. Now they've nerfed them to where it's only 2.5 minutes. And so you're going to have to go back and buy wards every 2.5 minutes. So it's like, you know, if you're Sona and you're regenning, you know, off of your Athene's Unholy Grail and your Frostfang, if you're regenning 6 mana per second, you know, you're out on the battlefield for, I don't know, 2.5 minutes at a time before you have to go get more wards or whatever, however many seconds that is, like 180 seconds. That's 3 minutes. So let's just say it's 180 seconds times whatever, 6. It's going to give you like over 1,000 mana in 3 minutes off of your mana regen that you have. And then you also have your base mana, which at that point in the game is probably going to be somewhere around like 700. So you're going to have at least like 1,700 mana. And your stuff is not that expensive later on, right? We're talking 70 mana on your Hymn of Valor. This is like 100 mana. And you're not going to be sitting there like constantly A-ramming, or you shouldn't in the mid-game, right? You're going to be spending time rotating. You're going to be spending time warding, clearing wards, moving between lanes, preparing for objectives. When you're in the laning phase, yeah, you need a lot of mana and you can trade a lot. But when you're outside of the laning phase, there's going to be more downtime between fights. So your mana regen is going to kick in and allow you to keep rotating and keep gaining more mana. And so it's like, can you really like reasonably tear through 1,700 mana every 3 minutes? Do you need that much mana regen? Like, what are you doing, you know, to require that kind of mana regen? Unless you're just like literally just A-ramming for 3 minutes in the mid lane, because you're going to have to go back and get wards, or you should be going back to get wards. So that's my whole thing, is it's like this day and age, you also get extra regen from your mana flow band. You're going to be getting Redemption Second, which is going to give you an extra 150% mana regen. I just think that if you're like reasonably managing your mana, you're just never going to run out of mana. And so you really don't need to do the tier. And, you know, we looked on stream, like a lot of top-level players, the #1 and #2 Sona players in Korea, according to op.gg, don't do that anymore. So that's different from if you're doing mid-lane Sona or you're doing AD carry Sona, where you're actually going to get a lot of gold and you can afford things like Seraph's Embrace and Lichbane and things like that. Like, those items are definitely good on Sona, but it's all about budget, right? When you're playing support Sona, you're balling on a budget, man. Like, everybody'd love to have a Ferrari, but realistically, you're probably getting a Volvo. You know what I'm saying? Or like a Toyota or something, Corolla, you know? You're going to be getting something like that. You can't afford a Ferrari. But if you're big balling, you know, if you're mid lane or an 80 carry and you're getting like 150 or 200 CS, you know, by the mid game, yeah, you're big balling. You can afford the big ticket items just like every other mage in the game. But you just can't do that as support Sona, because economy matters, and those items are the most cost-efficient items on Sona: Athene's, Ardent Censer, and Redemption. So, anyways, that's what I'll say about Sona this time. You know, you can build tier if you want. If it makes you feel good to run around and spam all your spells, that's cool and everything. But just keep in mind that you are shortchanging yourself your Redemption. So in the middle of if your team loses a team fight at 20 minutes because the enemy support has their Redemption and you don't, you're 800 gold short because you bought tier, and you're wondering why you lost that game, that could be a major reason why you lost that game, right? Is because they had a big ticket item and you didn't, because you spent a third of an item on a tier, which can set you back by like 5 minutes in your build, maybe more, depending on how many deaths there are. So anyways, that's just my recommendation. That's my word of the wise. That's something that I get asked about a lot on the stream, not just earlier tonight, but I get asked this in comments all the time. What do you think about Lichbane Sona? What do you think about tier Sona? All this kind of stuff. And that's what I think. I think that, like, you can do that if you're mid or 80 carry, if you're getting minion kills. But as a support, you're on a budget, and you need to get stuff that's going to help your team out a lot more than that. You need to get Redemption. You need to get Ardent Censer, Athene's. All of this stuff helps your team out tremendously. So you're really lowering your ability to team fight by doing that. Anyways, so that's the history of it. So it was good at one point. The game has changed over the last 2 years, and particularly right now in this moment as of 9.7. That's not what I would recommend. But you can, you know, she's so strong. Can you get it and win a bunch of games? Absolutely you can, right? Like, it's not like you're going to lose the game because you bought Tear of the Goddess, except in those corner cases that I talked about. But I'll guarantee you that your win percentage, if everything else is the same, will go up if you have a more progressive build where you're working towards items rather than stopping for a tier. Okay, so I would go Airy, Mana Flow Band, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, and then Bone Plating and Revitalize. Now, I do get asked about Klepto. Should you go Klepto on Sona? Klepto's nice, but realistically in the laning phase, you'll probably get like maybe 300 or 400 gold, which is very nice, and you get some potions, so it's not the worst on her, but Airy is so overpowered later on in the game. It's so strong. I mean, if you think about whenever you heal somebody and you're putting Airy on them, that Airy shield in the mid-game, when you take into account AP scaling and you take into account plus healing and shielding, that Airy shield is going to be like between 80 to 100 shield. And your baseline shield on Sona is going to be like 110. So if you look at this, or 125, 110. So when you heal somebody with this, You're healing one other person for 110. You're giving out a shield to a lot of people, which is nice. But that heal was for 110, right? And so whenever you heal somebody and then Aerie jumps over to them, and we look at Aerie here, you know, later on in the game, like I said, around level 11, it's going to be 60 base, but it's going to have a 0.25 scaling, which is insane on the shield. So we already talked about earlier how, hey, thanks for the sub. I appreciate it, Untold Legends. We talked about earlier, Athene's Unholy Grail by itself, you know, will often give you somewhere between like 60 to 90 AP, depending on how progressed your build is. And so you're going to be getting even more off of runes, even more off of, you know, Ardent Sensor. So it's very, very easy to get an extra, you know, 25 to 40 AP on your Aerie. So like I said, you're going to be talking about somewhere between 80 to 100 shield off of this. Your base heal is 110. Not like, yeah, you do get the shields and stuff. But just thinking about the heal itself, that's almost an extra 100% healing. That's an extra shield. So like even if you're tagging 5 people, it's still plus 20% plus healing and shielding pretty much whenever you're using your W. If you're only tagging like 3 people, then it's plus 33% because it's basically giving an extra shield on somebody. Not only that, Aerie triggers off of everything that Sona has. It's not just her W. So whenever you Q and, you know, empower your allies with the Q, then it'll go over and shield them. And the Q will trigger, like the aura triggers before the bolts will hit the enemy. So if you're standing next to somebody and you press Q, it's going to put Aerie on your ally rather than putting the damage Aerie on the enemy, right? So it also works with Song of Celerity. Whenever you, you know, E onto somebody, then that also gives them Aerie. So you're just spamming Aerie constantly late game fights. It's even a faster cooldown than your W. It's like you can reasonably get off 2 to 3 Aeries every single time Aria of Perseverance is going up. So then it's almost like tripling what this is. And it also benefits from plus healing and shielding, not just your AP, but if you end up getting 20% plus healing and shielding with Ardent Sensor plus Redemption, and then you have 5% off of Revitalize, and then if they're below 40% health with Revitalize, they get an extra 10% off of that. It just starts getting really nutty, like just how well Aerie works with her. Aerie also does a lot of damage in the laning phase. I mean, every time you auto-attack or hit somebody with a Q, it's going to tag them for an extra like 15 to 20 damage, and that adds up. You know, if you hit them in the lane 10 times, you do 20 damage, that's 200 damage during the laning phase. It's like they started off with 200 less health. So that's why I think you still have to go Aerie. All the time. It's like Klepto is fun. I love Klepto just as much as the next person out there. I play Klepto Caitlyn. I love Klepto so much on Viewers Night, and it's a lot of fun. But really and honestly, like the 300, 400 gold you get off of Klepto in the laning phase, it's nice. It does help you complete your items, but Aerie is so strong. I think you have to go Aerie. And everything in that tree, sorcery, is so good. Scorch is really good. Orb Gathering Storm, both of those can be good. Absolute Focus is really good. Mana Flow Band is really good. So everything in the sorcery tree is just crafted for Sona. I mean, that tree is so good for Sona in general. They had to nerf Sona like 6 times when they released the new runes with Aerie and that whole tree. So it's still really, really good on Sona. So anyways, I'll move on. But that's my Sona thing, because Sona is one of the champions that's so powerful right now that I think people can get away with suboptimal runes, suboptimal items, and still play pretty well. But you could crank up your win rate even higher if you were getting optimal stuff. So this is what I think. So, you know, there is a conversation for Klepto, maybe if you're against tanks or, you know, something like that. But you're also going to be squishier. If you go Klepto all the way down, you're going to have to get Mana Flow Band. So you're probably going to get Mana Flow Band, Absolute Focus, and that means you're not going to have Revitalize, which is really, really strong on Sona, and you're not going to have Bone Plating to protect you from all ends. So I think that you're really opening yourself up to a lot of problems by going Klepto on Sona. You know, once again, it's nice. You get the free boots. You know, the Cosmic Insight is really good. Biscuits can be good. But at the end of the day, I still think that Aerie is going to be the strongest, and that's also subsequently the most popular. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's strong, but that's what a lot of the top-end Sonas do, and that's why. It's because it just scales insanely well with her kit. Okay, let's talk about Lulu here. So Lulu is an up-and-comer. I've been talking about Lulu for several patches now and why she's moving up. She's just very, very good with on-hit users. especially Gensu users. Now, why is that, you might ask, if you haven't watched my other patch notes? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, this gives a lot of extra bonus attack speed. She's one of the only supports that gives a lot of attack speed on one of her abilities, right? Janna gives AD. I think that's it. Yeah, Sona, Soraka, Karma, they don't give any AD or attack speed. But she gives attack speed, so she gives a 45% attack speed. And if they're getting a lot of attack speed in their build already, if they're getting Gensu's, Blather and King, Wit's End, all of that stuff, then that means they're going to be firing more autos. And when they fire more autos, that means Pix is going to hit them more. Pix hurts a lot. So when you're level 9, you know, Pix is hitting for 63 damage each. I mean, on-hit damage is worth 25 each. 25 a pop. So if we do 25 times 63, that's like 1,600 gold you're giving your AD carry. That's just like, hey, here's 5 kills. Have fun. What? Like, that's crazy. Like, it's insane value. And then if we also calculate the 45 attack speed that you get off of this, and you're going to have it maxed out by level 9 or level 10, we'll just do 40% attack speed. So 1575 attack speed is also 25. You know, when you put Whimsy on somebody and then put your E on them to give them picks, you're giving them 2,500 gold. Essentially. Like, that's nutty. That's really, really strong. You know, and yeah, maybe, like, this isn't exactly on hit. It doesn't double trigger off of Gensu's. Okay, fair enough. It's on attack, okay? But still, even if you don't value it at the full 25, you can get the picture here, right? Even if you want to value it at 20 or even 15, you're giving multiple thousands of gold worth of value to your AD carry with these buffs. Now, the trade-off for that is you don't have very good plus healing and shielding, right? You have no healing. Your ult counts as an infusion of health, not a heal, so it does not scale with plus healing and shielding at all. It gets around Ignite, but it does not scale with plus healing and shielding. So keep that in mind. And then you have a pretty dinky shield here. It's okay. You know, it's 210 base. So it's all right. But she's not renowned for her healing and shielding. She's not going to scale on that front as well as something like a Sona or a Nami. They're going to outscale her big time in terms of plus healing and shielding and that kind of stuff. But where she comes in is if you have that hyper carry, if you have that Vayne that gets fed, if you have the Master Yi that's fed, if you have, you know, Kog'Maw. She's insane with Kog'Maw. Who's fed, it can be very, very powerful because you give all of this extra, like, on-attack damage, all this extra attack speed, and crazy movement speed. You give 30% movement speed. So anyone that wants to move fast to chase down people as well, Hecarim. Very, very good with Hecarim to speed them up. So this makes her very versatile in a lot of those places, especially now that you're seeing more of these Wit's End type of AD carries and even other champions that are going to get Wit's End, like Irelia, Shen, that type of stuff. Having this extra attack speed can be very, very nice. And she has pretty good protection against dive because of her ultimate. It's on a very low cooldown. It's on a 110-second cooldown. And that infusion of health is so helpful. It's just like, boom, you get a lot of health, and it knocks people up. So it has good CC, and it slows people for 7 seconds. So that's really good. And you can use this proactively, too, and not overheal. So if you're afraid somebody might literally one-shot your AD carry, the Zed goes in, you can just go ahead and pop this early if you want to, and it's not going to overheal. It can't. It just goes over their maximum health. So I think that that adds a lot of utility in that it can serve as CC, it can serve as a heal, it can serve as a slow. It's very, very handy. Also, getting True Sight with the E, I believe, reveals Vayne if she tries to roll around, which is very, very important in a lot of matchups. Vayne is a close-range champion. She only has 550 range, so you can polymorph her, which will stop her from rolling around, and you can spot her with picks, which will keep her from going invisible. So I think that that's going to make her very, very strong. She's good with a lot of the hyper carry champions, and she's pretty good against the close-range hyper carries, like the Vayne, like your Zeds. I guess Zed's an assassin more than a hyper carry, but she's got a lot of applications. She's good against burst, and she's good at buffing up hyper carries. It's just the 5v5, if you just sit there and have a, 20-second fight with a bunch of tanks slapping on each other, and someone has a Sona and someone has a Lulu, if your AD carry's behind, it's not going to be as good. Also, she is a support that is kind of AD carry dependent. You want someone who's getting the Gensu, who's getting the attack speed. So you don't want to do Lulu with like Misfortune or Jhin, stuff like that. You really want her with your Kaisas, your Vaynes, yeah, Jinx potentially can be pretty good. So I think that makes Lulu unique. I think it makes her interesting. She also has pretty good wave clear for a support. Typically, I don't get a lot of points in this in the laning phase, but if you have a hard push lane, if you have a Sivir or a Caitlyn or something, you could get 3 points of this in lane and just stick on 1 point in shield early on. You always max Whimsy in the mid game for team fights. So you want your Whimsy maxed until level 10. But that could give you pretty good push. I mean, not a lot of other enchanters have that kind of push. So that's nice. And this is not a super... And it's good poke, too. I mean, 170 damage, pretty respectable, especially because it only costs 60 mana. And it can wave clear pretty well. So she's got a lot of versatility about her. And I think that she can be good. The problem with a lot of people and why she has a low win rate compared to other enchanters, I think she's probably sitting at like 48, 49%. She's actually gone up quite a bit in the last week or so. She was like 48%. She keeps climbing up to 51%. People are figuring her out. She's getting more popular too. She's at 11%. But it's actually easier to mess her up than you would think. It's a bit harder to play her than at first glance because it looks like, okay, she doesn't really have any skill shots. You just point click on people except for like the Q, I guess. And that's easy. But the problem is these have 2 modes, especially Whimsy. If you try to click and... there's like a Zed right on top of your AD carry, and you try to polymorph the Zed, and you accidentally speed up your AD carry, and they die, that's really bad, right? And so when it's just like a huge cluster, right, everyone's just running around everywhere, and you're trying to figure out, usually if you want to polymorph somebody, and literally their frames are right on top of each other, it's very, very easy to misclick that and to do the wrong mode on that. Or if you're trying to shield an ally, and you accidentally damage an enemy, that can definitely be brutal as well. So... it can actually be mechanically a lot tougher than it seems. You have to have really precise mouse clicking, and sometimes you just have to get lucky if there's like 3 people right on top of each other to get the polymorph on the right person. So that can be rough. And then also just making the decision, right? Like in the heat of the moment in a fight, am I supposed to polymorph this person diving my AD carry? Or is it better to speed up my AD carry so they can run away? Or... you know, so they do more attack damage. Or another common one is, well, someone's about to run in to try to fight. Do I speed up my Malphite or my Olaf who's going to run in? Or are they going to get there anyways, and I really should speed up my AD carry so that they can get in there and DPS faster and so that they'll have more attack speed and put out more damage faster? These are tough questions as Lulu, right? Because you have different like ways that you can use your abilities, especially Whimsy. So just making the decision is hard, and getting the correct click can be hard in traffic as well. So that's part of what makes her a bit more difficult. And she's less forgiving. She doesn't have a heal in lane. So if you take a bad trade, it's really bad in the laning phase, right? You take a bad trade on Sona, it's like, okay, whatever. I can just heal up and play more defensively. But Lulu, it's a lot harder. And her ranges are really close. Remember how I was talking about how Nami has really long range, and that's good for her. You know, she's got like 900 range on the bubble, you know, like 800 on her E, 7 or 750 on her wave. All of Lulu's are about 650, or at least the Whimsy and the help picks are 650. So you got to get pretty close to the action. Not as close as Soraka or Sona. Both of those you have to get under 500. But getting to 650 is still really close. That's definitely within ability range. So you could get blown up, you know, by a Lissandra or anything else. You know, Irelia can jump onto you. You're really opening yourself up in some fights when you have to get close enough. So you have to be a lot more careful with your positioning. But overall, I think she's very strong, especially as we get into this Wits End meta over the next patch. I would not be surprised at all if they hot nerf Wits End within a week. It's just like super, super strong. But even if they nerf Wits End a little bit, she's still like gaining in a lot of popularity because a lot of the best AD carries right now are these on hit, or certainly some of the most popular ones. You think about Kai'Sa and Vayne are these on hit type of champions. And even Jinx, she technically gets crit, but she benefits tremendously from attack speed. So we're seeing a lot less of the burst champs, right? The Misfortunes, the Jins, that type of stuff. And we're seeing champions that benefit way more from attack speed. And so that's giving Lulu a lot of extra value here. So just go Airy, Mana Flow Band, Absolute Focus, Water Walking. And then I like going Footwear and Cosmic Insight. She doesn't benefit as much from Revitalize because she doesn't have as much plus healing and shielding as the other champs. You could easily try out something like Zombie Ward and the Movement Speed Hunter if you wanted to. So it's kind of up to you. I think Footwear is nice on her, though. It gives her, you know, allows her to get to that Ardent Sensor a bit faster. And then Cosmic Insight is good. You can also go Biscuits if you're against like an Enchanter that's going to be harassing you a lot. Biscuits can help out as well. Now, Lulu is one where you do want to go Ardent Sensor before Athene's. The major reason is she scales so hard off of Ardent Sensor because of how it interacts with her Whimsy and her Pix Fairy Companion. She also doesn't have as many mana problems. Like, this is only 65 mana at all levels. The shield can get a bit more expensive, but you know, a lot of her stuff is going to be cheaper than some of the other champions. So that's why I think that you can actually rush Ardent Sensor on her and feel pretty good about it. But anyways, that's the case for Lulu. I think she's very strong right now, even though her win rate's not amazing, even though it's lower than the other enchanters. I think she's unique, and that she fits into a lot of compositions right now. Whereas, you know, Soraka, we'll talk about her in a second, but most people will have Soraka as tier 1, but I have her as tier 2 just because I think Sona does almost everything that Soraka does better. And I know that'll be debatable for a lot of people. I know we have a lot of Soraka lovers out there. Sorry, Ed. I know you love Soraka. I love Soraka. She's fun. But I just always try to be real with you in that I think that they compete for the same type of thing, which is teamfight healer. And I just think Sona does it better most of the time. So that's why I have Soraka down a bit more, is because if they're ever both open, like 99% of the time, I'm going to take Sona. Versus if Sona and Lulu are both open, there might be some times where I take Lulu, because I want to play something that's a bit safer, or I want to complement my hyper carry a little bit more. So I think that uniqueness of pick also comes into play when you should think about which champions you're picking and sort of their power levels. Nami, similar, where she's kind of like an in-between, right? Like she's got some scaling, not as much as Sona, but she has some CC, so she's kind of in a similar vein to Lulu. So she's sort of like a hybrid between Lulu and Sona. Like, she's got the healing, but not as much as Sona, but she's got more CC than Sona. But she has, you know, more healing than Lulu, but less scaling than Lulu. So I think these three are like a pretty good trifecta of enchanters. They all kind of do different things, and they're good in different situations. Okay, Leona definitely needs to be on tier 1 somewhere. She could be up higher than that. This was a huge buff to Leona on this patch. It's 3 seconds off of her E, which is what you max second. I've even considered maxing it first, but I still think you need your W for the survivability. But nevertheless, this is going to be really strong. Even in the mid game, it's going to be lower by at least 2 seconds, right? If you get 3 points in this, you know, by level 9 or 10 or whatever, it's still going to go from, you know, 11 seconds down to 9 seconds, which can be very strong. And then by level 13, it's fully 6 seconds. And the reason that's so strong, 3 seconds is obviously a big deal, but because of how she chains her CC together, you're going to have extremely high uptime on your initial chain. So when you go in, you know, you will root them for a second as you go in with your E, right? And then you're going to Q them. That'll stun them for an additional 1.25 seconds. That's 2.25 seconds. Right? And then you're going to ult them. That's going to stun them for an extra 1.5 seconds. So now they've been stunned for 3.75 seconds. If you have, your Q is always going to be on I think it's either a 5 or a 6 second cooldown. Now your E's on a 6 second cooldown. You can very comfortably get like maybe 30% CDR, get this down to 4 seconds. So now it's only another, so they've been stunned for, you know, 3.5 seconds already, 3.75 seconds already by the Leona. And now your E is about to come back up in less than a second. And so you can just E right back onto them. And then by the time you E, that's going to be, you know, 1 more second. They're going to be stunned. And then you can stun them again with your Q. So realistically, you can chain stun somebody with Leona now for almost 6 full seconds. They're going to have like less than 1 second to react in the middle of that. So they're going to have like a free 0.5 second to 1 second in the middle where they could flash or dash or whatever. But this has range on it, don't forget. So you can latch back onto them and chain stun them again. So it's not entirely full stun lock, you never move for 6 seconds. But it's pretty damn close on a lot of champions. And that's what's so dangerous about this buff on her, is because this in many ways is your mobility. It allows you to stick to people. When it's 9 seconds, you know, really they have 6 seconds to get away from you, right? For an extent, right? And even if you have a bunch of CDR, they're going to have like 3 seconds or so to get away, 2 or 3 seconds before your E is back off a cooldown. But now they don't. And so you can chain CC people a lot easier with this, especially in like longer team fights. You can just zip around the map and peel and CC over and over and over again. So she's already very, very good into most enchanters. Like, she's awesome into the top 3. Well, you might say, well, if she counters these top 3, why don't you put her higher? The thing is, Morgana and Thresh are both very popular and pretty powerful right now, and they counter her pretty hard. So she can get countered. If you want to ban Morgana, I think you could potentially first pick Leona. But she's just very aggressive. I mean, everyone knows Leona. The thing about her is that she can go through minion waves, right? So she, unlike Thresh, unlike Nautilus, she can E you through a minion wave and start a fight almost any time, right? And she can start a fight from 1100 range with her ult, which is on a 90-second cooldown. That's something a lot of people forget too. That's ludicrously low. Like, Nautilus has a 120-second cooldown on his ult, and that's already really good. But if you think about, like, Sona's ult's 140 seconds, Janna's ult's 150 seconds, Lulu's 110. So Lulu has a pretty fast ult, but like 90 seconds in 2019 is insane on something that like has that much engage potential and that much team fight presence. And it goes down to 60 seconds late game. It's like, what? You can run around and make a play almost as fast as you can get there, right? And it's 1200 range. If they don't have a flash or a dash, i.e. a Sona, a Lulu, you know, those type of champs, they're not going to get away unless they have their flash. You can almost always hit them with this and get the full 1.5 second stun. Even if you just barely clip them, it's still going to slow them by 80% for a 1.5 second. And you're still going to get on them with your E. So yeah, obviously it's best if you get the stun, but even if you don't, there's a pretty wide margin of error there. Even if you miss, you're still going to get them with your E, most likely. And she does a lot of damage. It empowers your auto attacks to do a pretty good extra chunk of damage. So that's like, you know, in the mid-game, that's like 300-something damage. And then you also have these Sunlight procs, which, you know, in the mid-game are like 80 extra damage per person hit. So in a team fight, if you're hitting multiple people with your E, you're hitting multiple people with your Eclipse, this is putting out a lot of damage. You hit 3 people in a team fight, you know, it's 240 damage off your passive if you hit them with your Eclipse or your ultimate or whatever. So she puts out a lot of damage in the early game. They have nerfed it. You know, about a year and a half ago, she was pick banned every game, like 55% win rate when Aftershock first came out. But she's still going to be very, very strong. And that's what makes her strong, is that she has that fairly reliable engage in the mid game with Solar Flare. During the laning phase, she puts out a lot of damage. She can engage on you anytime, anywhere. And she's pretty tanky with Aftershock plus Eclipse. You're not doing a lot of damage to her when she comes in. So I think that's good. And just the low cooldown on this and your ability to roam around and make plays around the map with it is very, very strong. So I think that makes Leona a fantastic contender. So she is weak to Thresh, she's weak to Morgana, and she's weak to Tahm Kench. So that's why you don't see her in pro play most of the time, is that like Tahm Kench is super popular. Thresh is super popular. So she's weak against Thresh because whenever you try to go in with your E, he can just flay you backward. Any Thresh that's like, I don't know, that knows what's going on is going to be able to flay you back out of your E. And then Morgana, of course, can black shield your engage, which is really annoying. You do some decent damage, but you don't do quite enough magic damage to break that shield. So yes, you can fake them out. Like, you can E onto one person with your Zenith Blade, and then she's going to black shield them, and then you are the other person, then walk over and hit them with your Q. But it takes a lot of working around. And then Tahm Kench is going to be really strong, too, because anytime you try to engage, he's just going to eat them with the W, and then tongue lash you back, and you're going to take a bad trade. So you can win those matchups, but it's hard. So she's very good, but she's very sort of linear. She has one mission. She's going in for the hard engage and the kill. If you're behind in the game, that can feel bad. If you get counter ganked or counter picked in the laning phase, that can feel bad also. So she's pretty good. She has very low scaling. I mean, you can still get things like Zeke's, which does help out your AD carry with scaling. Get Knight's Vow, Locket. You know, you've got some decent stuff you can get there, but it's not going to be as much scaling as the Enchanters. So she's good. You know, I think she's really good now after that buff. So if you want to play an Enchanter, I would highly consider probably banning Leona if you're a top pick. So if you're like first pick, first ban, you might ban Leona. Although she's not a super high pick rate right now, to be honest with you. But she is very good into Enchanters. So it's up to you. But I think that's something worth considering. Okay, Morgana, and then we got to move on. I've spent so much time talking about the top 5 as I always do, but we'll move on a little bit. Okay, so Morgana is still going to be very strong, particularly because there are so many hyper carries running around right now. Being able to black shield your Yi, your Irelia, your Jinx, your Twitch, all that stuff, going to make it very, very hard, especially if tanks start coming back in. things like Kaisa and Vayne will absolutely tear through those tanks as long as they don't get chain CC'd. So that's where the Black Shield comes in. So if you have a hyper carry and you can Black Shield them, it's very strong. You also have a 3-second bind, which is insane. So you have very good CC, very good anti-dive. So I think that makes her strong. So you might say, well, why isn't she higher? She is tier 1, first of all, so that's about as high as you can go. But second of all, some enchanters can outscale her because her Black Shield is on a long cooldown. It doesn't offer any protection against AD champs. So like if they have a Talon, a Zed, a Hecarim, something like that, they're probably just going to one-shot your AD carry if you're playing Morg. But then enchanters can also get something like Mikhail's and cleanse away your stun, potentially your bind off your Q. Then they just outscale you with plus healing and shielding. So it's just going to heal through whatever you're trying to do in fight. So part of that's going to come down to who has the bigger hyper-scaling champ. You know, somebody's got Jhin at 3 items. Somebody's got Vayne at 3 items. So she can be good, but I think she has a tough matchup into enchanters, at least to some extent. But on the flip side, she is very good against hard engage. So she's very good against Leona. She's very good against Thresh. Very good against Nautilus. Nautilus is kind of a boutique pick. I don't expect a lot of people to play Nautilus, but I think he is pretty good. So that's it. She's kind of counterpick-ish champion, but you could safely blind pick her if you want to. I mean, there's nothing where she's absolutely going to get slammed. You know, part of this is personal taste. You know, I just don't seem to win a lot as Morg. I don't know. I feel like I just don't have as much impact on the game when I play Morg as if I play some other champs, but you know, some of that might come from my lack of experience, recent experience playing her a lot, but she's okay. She is very strong, so I'm putting it up there. Respect. I just personally, you know, don't like to play her that much right now, but, you know, I did play her. I played her tonight. I'll play her where I think that it's going to benefit the team a lot. Okay, Tier 2 Nautilus. I still think that Nautilus is pretty good. He did get a buff a couple of patches ago. He's just a CC machine. And one thing about Nautilus that's also really good is he has wave clear. So he has that E that can help you push, apply extra pressure to towers, or allow you to get priority to rotate for dragon or to go get better vision. He's one of the only tanks with really good wave clear. It also has hard engage. So someone like Thresh doesn't have good wave clear at all. Neither does Leona. But you can actually wave clear yourself with Nautilus, which, you know, in pro play that doesn't matter. But in solo queue, it could. You know, helping your team push faster the tower, or your AD carry just doesn't want to push the wave before they back, but you have to push or they're going to be able to freeze outside the tower. So wave manipulation, very good on him. He can also escape, which is something that a lot of the mainline tanks can't do as easily. You know, the Leona, the Thresh, they have a hard time getting away if they get into a bad situation. Nautilus can actually get away. You know, he can hook shot onto towers or onto terrain and escape pretty easily. That also allows him to rotate around the map really quickly. Because every time you hit a wall, it reduces the cooldown on your hook by a ton, and it doesn't cost very much mana. So you can just kind of zip around the map really quickly with that hook, and it can get you there a few seconds faster, potentially. The ultimate's also very nice. They can't juke it. You know, so if they're playing something like Vayne, if they're playing something like Ezreal, Lucian, you know, they can juke Nami bubbles. They can juke, you know, Leona ults and things like that. They're not juking that missile. The only way you're getting out of that missile is if you become untargetable through like a stopwatch or an hourglass or something like that. So that means that you have a really good chance that you're going to be able to get on your priority target. They're not escaping, right? And it hits multiple people. So not only does it like damage them, but it knocks them all up. So you can knock up an entire team in a team fight and do a ton of damage. So it's like Thresh doesn't have that. You know, he can hook one person. You can flay a couple of people. That's not the same as a, you know, over a 1 second knockup. So I think that makes him really strong. You know, he just has a ton of CC. The issue is you have to have a clean shot with your hook. You cannot hook through minions. You can't even hook over walls, right? And he doesn't have like the same kind of flexibility as someone like Thresh. I have him higher than Thresh because I think he's easier to play. But I think he brings a lot of unique things to the table that a lot of people underestimate, right? Like the wave clear, most notably, and your ability to actually escape bad situations. And his hitbox on his hook is huge. Like, it's so easy to hit a Nautilus hook versus something like a Thresh hook. It's basically instant, and it's got like 2 or 3 times the width on the hitbox. So I think that makes Nautilus really, really strong. So I'd highly recommend giving him a whirl. Also, like, really late game, you have the option of going something like Ardent Censer. Like, that can be kind of a troll pick, but if you get Eye of the Equinox and you get, like, you know, your Zeke's, your Knight's Vow, stuff like that. And then, like, late game, you're like, wow, we have a really fed Kindred and a really fed Vayne on the team. You can go Font of Life and take Ardent Censer. You're going to be a bit squishier if you do that. But there is a precedent for things like this on tanks that have good utility, right? So someone like Thresh, you see Thresh's go Redemption sometimes. It's the same kind of concept. It's really good for team fights, but it makes you a lot squishier. So you just have to play a bit more conservative. It's the same thing with Nautilus. Like, you're going to have to be sort of in peeler mode, right? You can't, like, hard engage with your Q. I guess you can. You're going to get blown up, though, if you're trying to 1v5 and your team's not on the same page. So you might instead want to engage with your ultimate on somebody and then just, like, hold on to your hook and just kind of, like, try to peel off of your AD carry with this build. Like, use your E, your hook, and your W to peel instead of, like, diving in face first and eating, like, everybody's ultimates and AoE. So it's just an option. Because when you have Font of Life, whenever you slow somebody, then anyone that attacks the slowed person is going to get a heal. That heal counts as a heal coming from you, which triggers Ardent Censer. So you can give your whole team the Ardent Censer buff with Nautilus because your E is AoE, it slows everybody down. It could potentially trigger on a lot of people. So sometimes people say, oh, Strategy Professor is really meta, you know, and doesn't do a lot of off-meta stuff, doesn't consider off-meta builds. I do. Trust me, I do. And this is one that I actually recommend. I'm just not an all-capser. You know, if I don't think it's good, even if it's interesting, I'm not going to recommend it to you. It's only stuff that I think is interesting. And I do, you know, a lot of times what I think does coincide with the meta because the meta is usually right. Like millions and millions of people playing League of Legends, often they figure out most of the stuff pretty quickly. Right? So for something to stay like undercover, be secret OP for a long period of time when millions of people are trying their best to break the game is difficult. It does not happen very often. It does happen from time to time. You know, you'll see stuff that comes out of nowhere, like Tank Victor Top, for example. Like Galio support. There were some changes to patch notes which enabled those types of builds. But anyways, y'all see what I'm saying. But this is one that I think is definitely worth considering because he does have AP ratios. It's not a waste. You know, AP is a waste on Leona, for example. Like, she has virtually no AP ratios. But I don't, maybe her ult has a small one. Yeah, I mean, I guess she's got a couple. I guess you could do it on Leona. She's got a couple sprinkled in there. But Nautilus, like, he's got 75.75 here. You know, the Riptide's going to have usually somewhere between, like, 0.6 and 0.9. The Ultimate's going to have a 0.8. So it's not totally troll. It's okay. It does give you some movement speed. So I'm not saying you rush Ardent Censer first item. Don't do that. I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that in this meta where there are a lot of on-hit hyper carry champs, he is a tank who can potentially, in some circumstances, get Ardent Censer as a 4th or 5th item. So don't do it every game, but maybe every 10th game is Nautilus. That is an option that's on the table. So it does give him a little bit more flexibility in different game states to adapt to what's going on in a way that some other tanks can't. So I recommend Aftershock, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Unflinching. They did just nerf the health rune here, so maybe you go for the health rune Overgrowth a little bit more often. He does have health scaling on his shield. And then just Footwear and Cosmic Insight. If you want to rush Mobility Boots and try to make some plays around the map, then you can substitute Footwear for Biscuits, and that would be pretty good. So you go Biscuits, Cosmic Insight. You could go for like a Zombie Ward package if you want. You could go Zombie Ward plus Relentless Hunter if you want to try that as a secondary. He does like the movement speed. The AP could be pretty decent on him like we talked about before. So that's something to consider. But then usually either Moby Boots or Ninja Tabby, depending on if you're the primary tank and how much you need to roam. Mobies are probably the standard. And then Equinox. And then I still think Zeke's Knight's Vow. You know, you could go for just straight Knight's Vow into Locket if you think you're going to be team fighting more and if your AD carry is really far behind. But usually some combination of these items with the Ardent Censer option really late. I guess you could maybe try Redemption as well. He does have a shield. I mean, people are getting it on Thresh a lot. People are getting it on Tahm Kench more and more often. So maybe. I mean, maybe Redemption. The problem is, like, you usually want to go in and CC, you know, a bunch of people. So usually you're a bit more of a frontliner than a Thresh or a Tahm Kench. So it's up to you. But he does have the options to go those things. Okay. Speed up a little bit faster here. Okay, Soraka, I talked about her a little bit ago. She is very strong. You see her in a lot of games. She has a really high win rate, so there's definitely an argument that could be made for putting her tier 1 for sure. The reason that I don't, though, is just because I just think that Sona does what she does better most of the time. Like, Sona has those auras, so she can heal most people most of the time, like, or a bunch of people repeatedly in fights, versus, like, Soraka is single target healing. You have your ult, which does a lot of burst healing, but you know, like one Sona W is going to be the equivalent of over 1,000 combined plus healing and shielding off of just one item a lot of times with Athene's Unholy Grail versus, you know, Soraka is going to be healing for like 400. Now, Soraka is on a lower cooldown, but there's similar teamfight contributions. Just the major sticking points for me are Sona does not get blasted as much by grievous wounds. That destroys everything in Soraka's kit, or at least nerfs it by 40%. Sona, a lot of her power is from the shield in her W, right? So yeah, it does hurt the healing, but a lot of your power is actually a shield in teamfights. Because the heal just affects you and one other person for like 220. The shield is where you get like 600 in shielding by tagging everybody else. So you have a little bit more insulation from that item, from Executioner's Calling or Morellonomicon. Secondly, her harassment is a lot more consistent in the laning phase. You know, Soraka has to hit Qs, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sona just walks up and presses Q and auto attacks, and that's a lot of harassment, you know? And so I think that she's just easier to play in that sense, and she has better CC. So Sona, you know, being able to ult and just sort of stun a huge group of people for 1.5 seconds is really nice. Like, Soraka's silence can come in clutch at times for sure, but it's not the same as a stun. It's not the same as an AoE 1.5 second stun. Now, it's off cooldown faster, but I just feel like, and Sona's a lot faster. You know, just in general, her E just allows her to zip around the map a lot faster. Her and her teammates to zip around the map a lot faster. And I just feel like she's a bigger abuser of Ardent Censer and Athene's. It just works so well with her kit. Also, Sona heals herself. So she's a lot less vulnerable to all-ins and fights, because whenever you're healing and shielding everybody else, you're also healing yourself. Versus Soraka actually hurts herself in fights. So you have to be a lot more careful with your positioning. You just get hit by one stray skill shot, you know, in a fight, and you have to get really close. You know, you have to get within like 450 to get the Soraka heal off. So she is very strong. It's just, I think she's a bit more susceptible because she's going to be at lower health. Her harassment is not as consistent in the laning phase, and her scaling is okay. Like, they're on par. They're similar in scaling. So if you like Soraka, you can definitely play her. You can definitely win a lot of games, but I would prefer most of the time Sona. You know, the win rate does, you know, Soraka does have a high win rate, but Sona's just so overpowered. And I think they compete for the, like, almost the exact same type of thing. Early harassment, scaling, enchanter for team fights. And because they just don't have enough differentiation between each other, that's why. So that's why I have Lulu higher than Soraka. Even though Lulu is a lower win rate, she has a very special niche. She's very good at very specific things and very specific comps. She doesn't compete with Sona for the same stuff. So that's how I see it. I just feel like I would end up picking Lulu and be more successful in Lulu in more situations than I would picking Soraka when Sona's up. Now, if Sona's banned, you know, that's a different story, but anyways, we'll move on. Okay, Thresh, still very strong. He did get a nerf to his hook a couple of moments back. Morgana's very popular right now. Morgana's very good into Thresh. It's kind of a skill matchup with the Enchanters. If you hook them and kill them early, you can definitely, you know, steamroll the lane. If you don't, they're going to outscale you. Once they get the you know, Athene's Unholy Grail plus Redemption, it's really hard to come back from that. You're going to have to land some super clutch hooks to come back from that. So it's okay. He's okay. If you're really good on him, he's a one-trick specialist. If you're extremely good on Thresh, yes, he's very good right now. But if you're just casually playing Thresh, it's a bit tougher because Enchanters are so strong right now, and there's a very popular counter pick that's really strong in the meta right now with Morgana. Right, Sadie? He is on the flip side. He is very good against Leona, and Leona is going to be a lot more popular on this patch, I think. So it's okay, but especially with all of the Wits End champs and the the Ginsu users, the Vaynes, the Kaisas, and all that running out, like being able to get Ardent Censer is very, very strong right now, and he just can't comfortably get it. You could, but you know you're probably not going to want to get that item. So he's missing out on like a clutch item too in this particular meta. So He is good. He's also way better in a meta where if you land that hook, it's like you're definitely killing somebody in lane. You know, with your Jhin, your Misfortune, your Draven, your all-in champs, he's going to be a lot stronger. If you're sitting there with like Vayne, you land your hook, they might kill him, but it's a lot less likely that they're going to kill him than it would be if it was with a Jhin or a Misfortune, especially after the nerfs to Dark Harvest, the nerfs to Ignite, and just a lot of the early game power. You know, he has fallen a little bit from where he was earlier in the preseason and earlier even in Season 9. But he can still be strong. Okay, I've got Kench up here a little bit higher. Now, I pulled up Kench because he's kind of my go-to against Leona. You can do Morgana, you can do Thresh into Leona, but I like how safe he keeps people. Also, he's very good against Hecarim. There aren't many chances or many champs that can stop a Hecarim from getting on your AD carry, but he certainly is one of them. So he's good against Thresh. He's good against Leona. He's good against Morgana. He's good against Nautilus. Anything that's going to be an all-in champion lane, he's going to be really strong into that. So, and anything that's like a diver, you know, like a Hecarim or maybe even a Rammus, but I doubt it. Ashe. Anything that Sejuani, anything that relies on diving or very heavy CC, he's going to be solid. So he's very good with Jinx in particular because Jinx has so much damage potential, but her big weakness is she has no mobility. And she can get run down and murdered, right? But if you just spit her back out, she has such long range. If you eat her and spit her back out on the back line, she has such huge range with her rockets, with her zap, with her ultimate, her chompers, all of that stuff. She can make really good use of that so she doesn't have to run back into danger. You know, if you eat Vayne, for example, as Tahm Kench, she's going to have to roll right back into danger to do any damage, whereas Jinx can operate really well from long distance, particularly if people are already low and she can get kills and resets off of her rocket. So historically, he's very good with champions like Jinx. He's also good with like things like Twitch to an extent, although if you eat Twitch while he's ulting, he's losing uptime on his ult, so that can be kind of awkward. But if you have those kind of long-range, hyper-scaling champs, then specifically Jinx, then he can be very good. So he could be good with like a Kog'Maw as well, but once again, if you eat him, you're losing uptime on the W. But I could see a world where he's good with a lot of those champs. Also, if you're against somebody who doesn't have very good escapes yourself, right? So if you pick Tahm Kench Jinx and they pick something like, I don't know, Soraka Draven, if you can get your AD carry to come bottom, you can use that ultimate to get a ton of free kills in the bot lane. So he's very, very good at macro. He's good at controlling scuttles. He's good at keeping key targets safe. So as long as you outscale the enemy team, especially with a hyper carry, AD carry, then he's a very good pick. If they have higher scaling, he's a bad pick. So if your team has Ezreal and they have Twitch or they have Jinx, it's really, really bad. Or they have Sona or something like that, it's very, very bad because you can't do anything to get on them hardly other than like flash Q or something like that. It's like really desperate moves that usually don't work out. So he's very good at protecting if you trust that your AD carries are going to do really well, but he's also very bad if they have worse scaling than you. You're just going to have to rely on your macro and getting picks. If you have a very good split pusher on your team, he's good at protecting them. So if you have an Irelia, you know, and some like a Shin, some of these things, then he can be very good because you can stay mid lane, sort of help your team out, and then if they send 2 to top lane, you can warp up to top with someone from mid and turn it into a 3v2 instead of a 1v2. So that's why he's used in Pro. If you ever wondered, why is he used so much in Pro? Well, he protects the AD carry, but he's also extremely good if you're running a split push comp, like a split pick, which has been very popular in solo queue, but is also very popular in pro play. All right, so it makes it very, very difficult to split against Tahm Kench. Like, he almost forces you to team fight because you have to always be scared that he's going to warp in behind you with someone and pick you off. So he just makes it, and if you manage to win a fight, you can rotate and take towers really quickly. You can rotate and start barons faster. Like, he's just really, really good macro pressure. I mean, it's basically a teleport for 2 that's on a 120-second cooldown instead of a 5 or 6 minute cooldown. I mean, it's OP as hell. You know, a lot of these, like, macro things, like Galio's 200 seconds on his ult. Twisted Fate is something like 180 or 200 seconds on the ult. Teleport is like 6 minutes, right? Tahm Kench, 2 minutes. So that's why he's played a lot in pro play and why he has been for like the last 2 years. And if you can use that, macro correctly, if you can communicate that with your team and get some really good rotations, he can be strong. The reason he has such a low win rate is that's difficult. A lot of people don't feel comfortable shot calling. A lot of people don't use his strengths. They just sit there and just AFK and just hope for the best, you know. But you have to pick him into certain comps to make sure you outscale, and you have to really leverage that ultimate and make some big plays with it. If you just sit there all game and never use your ult, you're going to have a 44% win rate. But, you know, if you use it very well, you can have a really high win rate. So, let me just look here really quick. And I know we're out of time, pretty much. Wow, really? Number 1 and number 2 are the same person right now? Spamming Hecarim? Okay. That doesn't say anything about a champion being busted at all. What? That's happened before. I think TF Blade had number 1 and number 2 slot. I'm trying to look. Where's Humble Diligent? He's probably practicing for playoffs. I don't know who the highest support is. I can just look him up, though. That, you know, he's got a 72% win rate on Tahm Kench. Now, yes, he is a very good player, but the reason for this is he uses his macro very, very well. Okay, so don't, just because Tahm Kench has a 43% win rate, I know I've said win rate does matter, and it does in a lot of cases, but he's the type of champion where he has the potential, he has the kit, he has the ability to be really high impact. You just have to use him well. You know, it's not like Master Yi support, which is just awful. Right? He just does not have the kit to do that, right? Good champion, bad as support. It's like Tahm Kench is a victim of, like, he is very, very good at that role. He can do it. He's certainly better than Volibear's support. I can tell you that right now, even though the stats don't line that up. But it's just that people just don't take advantage of his potential because he's so macro-oriented, and you have to know so much about the metagame to make good plays with him. But if you pick him in the right circumstances, if you watch videos on my channel of Tahm Kench, or you watch some streams where I play Tahm Kench and we pull off a successful Tahm Kench game, you'll see that a hallmark of that is usually using the ults very effectively. Okay, Janna can be very strong. She is very good at peeling. The problem is she has like bad matchups into Sona and Nami. So she can kind of match them late game scaling. It's just the problem is her shield is in 18 seconds early, and she's just going to get obliterated in the early game. But on the other hand, she is very good against champions that are trying to dive you, right? So if we start seeing more Zacs, we see more Lees. Hecarim you can kind of peel, but a lot of times the problem is if you try to tornado him, he's going to ult through the tornado and kill you, probably, with just his ultimate. A good Hecarim will. So it's very, very hard to peel Hecarim right now. And he's the most popular sort of diver out there. But if you start seeing more, like I said, Zacs, very good against Rammus. If Rammus starts making a comeback with the Cinderholt changes, pretty good against Skarner. So she has a lot of potential, but I would only play her into other tanks. You need to be careful you don't pick her into Nami or Sona. But yeah, if they pick something like Tahm Kench or Braum or maybe Leona, that's kind of a tough one. That's a toss-up. You can stop her, you know, with your tornado, but that matchup has gotten a lot harder since they nerfed her tornado about 1.5 years ago to be a lot slower. So she can work if you want the peel. But once again, it's kind of similar to Tahm Kench in a sense where you better have the superior scaling because you're not going to have a lot of playmaking potential at all. So you bet, and you don't have lane pressure. You know, like Sona doesn't have a ton of playmaking either in lane. You can flash ult people, sure, but she has good harassment in lane, and she has very, very good scaling. Nami, you can make plays with Nami. You can land bubbles, right? You can land waves, things like that. So you do have some playmaking potential. It's not as much playmaking as like Leona, but it's something, right? Janna, really, it's nothing unless you like try to flash in front of them and ult them back into your team, which don't do that. That's a terrible idea most of the time. You're just going to be like chilling and peeling, you know, kind of like Tahm. You do scale better than Tahm, but you don't have the macro of Tahm, right? You can't warp around the map, but you do outscale him in a team fight. So it's just like if you want a peeler that scales, that performs really well over time, you know, Janna can be a pretty good option there. Okay, finally, Rakan, still like pretty good engage when your ult's up. The problem is if your ult is not up, your W is very slow. He has a really bad matchup into Leona and Morgana, who are both super popular right now. His matchup into Thresh is not great. And he just doesn't have a lot of presence in lane, so he can get bullied in lane by Nami and Sona as well. So it's just really rough. I mean, Rakan's my favorite support out there. I love Rakan. He's a lot of fun. But that nerf to his W is just absolutely brutal. And the way that the meta has shifted around, you're getting a lot more CC in the meta with the Leona, with the Morgana. And it's just really tough to win some of these all-ins. And he gets outscaled. He has pretty good scaling with his plus healing and shielding, but You know, Lulu's also a pretty tough matchup if we're being honest. You know, if she ults the person that you ult and then she polymorphs you, you're probably dead because he's very squishy. So I like him. He can be good in some of the right spots. Maybe if you have a Zyra on your team, you can consider him, but it's still going to be rough. Galio's okay. You know, if you're against something like a Leona or a Nautilus, he can be good. You know, he does have the same kind of thing going on as Thresh, where you have really good macro pressure, or as Tahm Kench, rather, where you have really good macro pressure. The problem is, like, Tahm Kench's ult is a 2-minute cooldown. Galio's ult is like a 3-minute and change cooldown. So you can use Tahm Kench's, like, almost twice as much, right? Not quite twice as much, but approaching that level. So that's one of the main issues with Galio there. So he can be good. You see him in pro play, but in solo queue, it's still going to be, you know, on the rough side. He's down here with the peeler tanks. So he's okay. He certainly can have his spots. Alistar can be good. Nice hard engage. The problem with Alistar is I'd just rather be playing Leona in solo queue. I think she does more damage. I think she has more CC. She can engage from further with 1200 range on her ult. Alistar is tankier, and he's very good in organized play because you can dive towers really early on with his ult. He also has sustain in case you get poked out, and he's pretty reliable, like all-in engage with his WQ combo. If you flash WQ or you Q and then flash while it's in the middle of the animation and then knock him back, you know, with your W. Like Alistar, like really high, like 0 ping environments, you can do things like Q flash. If you have like 50 ping, that's not happening probably. You could do like Q flash. You can flank really well. So Alistar is still like pretty good in pro play. I just think that a lot of the time, especially in solo queue, I'd rather just be playing Leona. Braum, pretty good peeler tank. You know, if you have Lucian on your team, he can be good. Doesn't have a lot of playmaking potential, doesn't scale. And he does have really good team fight. But if I want team fight, I'm probably just going to play something like Sona. But if you need something, or even like something like Nautilus, like Nautilus has a lot of CC, a lot of team fight potential as well, but he can actually start fights. So I don't know. He's okay. You can definitely win with him. He doesn't have like a 0% win rate, but I think for solo queue, there are better options. In pro play, he's still going to be amazing. But in solo queue, not quite as good. And then Zyra, a knockdown from tier 2 to tier 3 because I expect to see a lot of wits in flying around. It's already tough out there for her. The nerfs to the plants really hurt her Comet build. Or the nerfs, the reclassification of the plants into AoE hurts her Comet build. The plants themselves were nerfed. Dark Harvest has been nerfed. Ignite has been nerfed. Enchanters got buffed, so they can heal through a lot of your harass. And then if 80 carries like Vayne start getting Wits End and Kaisa, if they start getting Wits End, it's going to be very, very difficult to burst them down. So she's still the best AP option out there, but I think it's going to be very difficult to play AP in this meta right now if it ends up being a Wits End meta, which I highly suspect it might be. I think you can expect to see at least 2 Wits Ends in a lot of games from different champs once people figure that out. Okay. And we don't have time for the honorable mentions. We're already way over time. So, I mean, these other champs, they can be good. Bard in particular seems to be rising up in power. I don't think he's quite strong enough yet to put him up here. But if you're a good Bard player, if you can roam around and make some of these plays, he could be decent. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, don't forget, like and subscribe. It does help out a ton. Helps other people find the channel. Check out the rest of the content as well. I should have an 80 carry tier list coming out later on today. We have topical guides, coaching sessions. We stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so come check it out. We'd love to have you. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, in the description, or you can email me at thestrategyprofessor@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Have a great day.